The coffee burned my tongue, but I kept drinking. Pain was good. Pain kept me focused while I sat in this sterile conference room, watching my husband's mistress explain why my position was being restructured. "Elena, I know this is difficult," Victoria said, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the merger documents. Those same nails that had left scratches on my husband's back 3 weeks ago. I'd seen the photos. "But Datapulse is absorbing Innovex, and we simply can't justify duplicate positions. You understand. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." I understood plenty. I understood that my husband, David Rivera, had orchestrated this entire merger just to put his girlfriend in charge of me. I understood that he thought I was too broken, too medicated, too dependent on him to fight back. What he didn't understand was that the antidepressants he'd been watching me take for 6 months. I'd been spitting them out. The therapy sessions he drove me to. I'd been documenting everything. The mental breakdown that made me quit my director position at Quantum Systems last year? Completely fake. "I'll need you to train your replacement," Victoria continued, sliding a packet across the table. 2 weeks should be sufficient." "Of course," I said softly, playing the defeated wife perfectly. "Whatever the company needs." Victoria's smile was venom wrapped in Chanel perfume. She was younger than me by 8 years, sharper, more ambitious. David had met her at a tech conference in Singapore. He thought I didn't know. He thought I'd been too buried in my depression to notice the late nights, the mysterious trips, the way he showered immediately after coming home. But I'd noticed everything. And I'd been planning. The meeting ended. I gathered my things slowly, making sure to look appropriately devastated. In the elevator, alone, I finally allowed myself to smile. I pulled out my phone, the real one, not the one David monitored, and opened an encrypted message. From J. Patterson, Acquisitions, Phase 2 complete. Board votes Tuesday. Your proxy shares confirmed. I typed back quickly, initiate Phase 3. Timeline moved up. We go in 72 hours. The elevator doors opened to the parking garage. I walked to my deliberately modest Honda, not the Tesla David had bought me, which he'd installed tracking software on. That car was at home. This car, registered under my mother's maiden name, was freedom. 40 minutes later, I was in a different city, in a different life. The law office of Morrison and Associates occupied the entire 23rd floor of the Bellevue Tower. My lawyer, Jennifer Morrison, looked up from her desk as I entered. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city skyline. "Elena, right on time," she said, gesturing to the seat across from her. "I have news. The board meeting has been moved up. Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. David knows? Not yet. And he won't until he walks into that conference room." Jennifer slid a folder across her desk. "Everything's ready. The proxy votes, the shell company disclosures, the evidence packages. Once the merger finalizes Monday afternoon, you'll own 51% of the combined entity." I opened the folder. Inside were documents that represented 2 years of secret planning. 2 years of hiding money, building alliances, buying shares through untraceable entities. 2 years of playing the perfect, broken, submissive wife while constructing an empire in the shadows. "What about Victoria?" I asked. Jennifer's smile was sharp. "She's been buying Datapulse shares too. Aggressive purchases over the past 6 months, thinking she's building a power base. What she doesn't know is that she's been buying them from one of your shell companies. At inflated prices. She's leveraged to her eyeballs." "How leveraged?" $3 million in debt. When the merger drops Datapulse's stock price, which it will, thanks to the unexpected accounting irregularities we're about to discover, she'll be wiped out. The accounting irregularities were real. I'd found them myself during my last month at Quantum Systems, before my breakdown. David had been so focused on pushing the merger through that he'd missed the creative bookkeeping Victoria had been doing to make Datapulse look more profitable than it was. I'd documented everything. Quietly. Carefully. And then I'd waited. And David? I asked, though I knew the answer. His affair with Victoria violates his employment contract. The evidence you provided, hotel receipts, text messages, the private investigator's photos, all admissible. Plus, his role in pushing through an unsound merger while personally involved with Datapulse CFO? That's a fiduciary breach. He'll be terminated with cause. No severance, no stock options, nothing. I sat back in my chair, letting the weight of it settle over me. 2 years. 2 years of pretending, of taking abuse, of watching my husband parade his mistress around while thinking I was too medicated to notice. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. There's one more thing, Jennifer said, her voice carefully neutral. Are you sure you want to go through with the personal component? The personal component. My divorce papers, already filed but sealed, waiting to be served. I'd chosen the timing carefully. David would receive them the same morning he learned he'd lost everything else. I'm sure, I said. He needs to understand what it feels like to lose control of his own life. Jennifer nodded, making a note. The private investigator will serve him at the board meeting. Maximum impact, minimum escape routes. Your assets are already protected, separate accounts, transferred properties, everything documented as premarital or inherited. He'll walk away with exactly what he brought into the marriage. Which was nothing, I finished. Precisely. I stood, smoothing down my deliberately plain skirt. The costume of the defeated wife. In 72 hours, I'd never wear it again. One last question, Jennifer said as I reached the door. What made you finally decide to stop pretending? I paused, remembering the moment 6 months ago that had crystallized everything. David and Victoria, in our bed, thinking I was too drugged to wake up. The things he'd said about me. The way he'd laughed. He told her I was too weak to ever fight back, I said quietly. That I'd always need him. That I was nothing without him. Jennifer's expression hardened. Then let's show him exactly who you are. The drive home took longer than usual. Friday evening traffic, everyone eager to start their weekend. I used the time to mentally prepare for the performance ahead. David would be home by 7, expecting dinner, expecting his broken wife to serve him while he talked about his day, his merger, his success. I'd play my part perfectly. One last time. Our house, my house, though the deed was in both our names, sat on a quiet cul-de-sac in Riverside Oaks. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, a chef's kitchen I'd designed myself. David loved to tell people he'd bought it for us, conveniently forgetting that the down payment had come entirely from my inheritance when my father passed. Everything he had because of me. And he'd forgotten that. I parked the Tesla in the garage, I'd driven the Honda to a storage unit across town, and entered through the kitchen. The house smelled of the lavender plugins David hated but I'd insisted on keeping. Small rebellions. Tiny acts of defiance he'd dismissed as me being emotional. I changed into worn yoga pants and an old t-shirt, pulled my hair into a messy bun, and started dinner. Chicken marsala, David's favorite. I'd learned to cook it perfectly over the years, adapting my mother's recipe to suit his preferences. Another thing I'd given up, piece by piece, until I'd almost forgotten who I used to be. Almost. The front door opened at 6:47. David's briefcase hit the floor with its usual thud, followed by his keys on the entry table. Elena, he called out. Where are you? Kitchen, I replied, keeping my voice soft, non-threatening. Dinner's almost ready. He appeared in the doorway, already loosening his tie. At 43, David was still handsome in that polished, corporate way. Dark hair graying at the temples, sharp jaw, expensive suits. He worked out 4 times a week with a personal trainer, paid for with my father's money, though he'd never acknowledged that. Rough day? I asked, stirring the sauce. You have no idea. He poured himself a scotch from the bar cart, also my father's, an antique I'd inherited. This merger is eating me alive. Victoria's been impossible to deal with. The irony of him complaining about his mistress to his wife wasn't lost on me. I kept my expression neutral, concerned, supportive. The perfect audience for his performance. Is everything okay with the acquisition? I asked, playing into his need to explain, to demonstrate his importance. It's complicated. There are some financial discrepancies in Datapulse's books, but nothing we can't smooth over. Victoria's handling it. He took a long drink. The board's meeting Tuesday to finalize everything. After that, we'll be the 3rd largest data analytics firm on the West Coast. He said, like he owned any part of it. Like his VP position at Innovex, the one he'd gotten because I'd recommended him to Marcus Chin, the CEO, and my former mentor, gave him any real stake in the outcome. That's wonderful, David, I said, plating his dinner. You've worked so hard for this. He had worked hard. Hard at sleeping with the CFO of the company he was acquiring. Hard at gaslighting his wife into thinking she was mentally ill. Hard at positioning himself to take credit for a merger he barely understood. We ate in relative silence, David checking his phone between bites. Probably texting Victoria. I'd stopped checking his messages months ago. I had copies of everything anyway, backed up in 3 separate locations, handed over to Jennifer's forensic accountant. How was your day? He asked absently, not looking up from his screen. Fine. Quiet. I pushed food around my plate. I had a meeting with Victoria this morning. About my position. That got his attention. He set down his phone, his expression carefully arranged into concern. Right. I heard about that. I'm sorry, Elena. It's just business. You understand. I understand, I said, and I did. I understood that he'd engineered my humiliation, that he'd thought it would keep me under his control, that he'd miscalculated so completely he'd never see the trap closing until it was too late. Maybe it's for the best, he continued, warming to his theme. You've been struggling so much lately. The pressure of working again might be too much. Maybe you should focus on getting better. On yourself. Getting better. Code for staying medicated, staying compliant, staying out of his way while he built his empire with his mistress. Maybe you're right, I agreed. I'll talk to Dr. Carson about it next week. Dr. Carson, my therapist, who'd been documenting David's psychological abuse for 18 months. Who'd written detailed reports about his manipulation, his gaslighting, his efforts to convince me I was losing my grip on reality. Reports that were now part of my divorce filing. David smiled, reaching across the table to pat my hand. That's my girl. I just want you to be happy. His touch made my skin crawl, but I didn't pull away. I smiled back, soft and grateful and broken. That night, after David fell asleep, he always slept soundly, never troubled by guilt or conscience, I crept down to my office. The room he thought I used for online shopping and Pinterest boards. The room where I'd actually been running a shadow operation that would make his merger look like child's play. I logged into my secure computer, the one hidden behind a false panel in the closet. 3 monitors flickered to life, displaying real-time data from a dozen different sources. My phone buzzed. A message from Marcus Chen. Heard about your meeting with Victoria. Playing your part perfectly. Board is locked in for Tuesday. Your reveal is going to be legendary. Marcus had been my mentor since I'd started at Quantum Systems 8 years ago. He'd watched David charm his way into my life, watched me recommend him for the VP position, watched the slow deterioration of my spirit as David's true nature revealed itself. When I'd come to Marcus 2 years ago with my plan, he'd been my first and most important ally. He was on Innovex's board. He controlled proxy votes from 3 major shareholders. And he'd been waiting for years to see David exposed for the fraud he was. I typed back, "Victoria suspect anything? Not even close. She thinks she's won. David thinks he's won. They have no idea they're both about to lose everything." I smiled in the darkness of my office. Victoria and David thought they were playing chess. They didn't realize they'd been playing checkers while I'd been orchestrating a symphony of their own destruction. My computer pinged. An email from Thomas Wright, the forensic accountant Jennifer had hired. Subject line, "Final report, Datapulse financial irregularities." I opened it, scanning the contents I already knew by heart. Victoria had been cooking Datapulse books for 2 years, inflating revenue, hiding expenses, creating the illusion of a company worth 3 times its actual value. She'd done it to attract acquisition offers, to make herself look like a genius CFO, to secure her position in any merger. What she hadn't anticipated was someone actually looking at the real numbers. Someone with my background in financial analysis. Someone who'd been director of analytics at one of the most respected firms in the industry. The report was detailed, damning, and completely admissible in court. On Monday, anonymous copies would be sent to the SEC, the State Attorney General, and Innovex's Board of Directors. By Monday afternoon, Datapulse stock would be in free fall. By Tuesday morning, the merger would be in serious jeopardy. Unless someone stepped in with a better solution. I opened another file, this one containing the alternate merger proposal I'd been developing for 6 months. A plan that would save Innovex from Victoria's fraud, restructure Datapulse's debt, and create a new combined entity that was actually profitable and sustainable. A plan with me as CEO. My phone rang. Private number. I answered on the second ring. Elena Reyes? A woman's voice, professional and crisp. Speaking. This is Amanda Foster from Titanium Capital. We received your investment proposal for the Datapulse acquisition. The partners are very interested. We'd like to schedule a call for tomorrow morning to discuss terms. That's going to create chaos. That's the point. He was quiet for a moment. You know this burns your bridges, right? Once this is public, there's no going back. People will know you were investigating. David will know. Victoria will know. Good, I said. Let them know. By the time they figure out how much I know, it'll be too late for them to do anything about it. Your funeral. I'll have everything sent by 8 p.m. Check your secure email for confirmation. The rain had stopped by the time David came home, well after midnight. I was in bed, pretending to sleep, when I heard him in the bathroom. The shower ran for a long time. Washing away Victoria's perfume, probably. Destroying evidence. Or trying to. What he didn't know was that I had everything. Hotel security footage showing them checking in together. Audio recordings of their conversations about me, about the merger, about their plans. Text messages he thought he'd deleted, recovered by the private investigator from backup servers. Every piece of evidence carefully documented, timestamped, and verified. Admissible in court. Devastating to his career. He climbed into bed beside me, his hair still damp. I kept my breathing steady, even, like I was deeply asleep. He sighed, settled in, and within minutes was snoring softly. I waited until I was certain he was out, then slipped downstairs to my office. My secure email showed a new message from Thomas Wright, sent at 7:53 p.m. Subject, packages delivered. I opened it, scanning the delivery confirmations. 37 emails sent simultaneously to regulatory agencies, board members, journalists, and industry analysts. Each one containing Thomas's comprehensive report on Datapulse's financial fraud, backed by evidence that couldn't be dismissed or explained away. By morning, the news would break. By Monday, Datapulse stock would be in free fall. By Tuesday, Victoria would be facing criminal charges and David would be answering some very uncomfortable questions about his role in pushing through a fraudulent acquisition. And I would be ready with the solution. My phone buzzed. Catherine Liu, sending the promised files from the Fairmont. I downloaded them to my encrypted drive, not watching them yet. I didn't need to see my husband with his mistress to know what was happening. The evidence was for the lawyers, the divorce proceedings, the final nail in his coffin. Instead, I opened a different file. My speech for Tuesday's board meeting. The words I'd been crafting for 2 years, refining and practicing until they were perfect. The moment when I would stop pretending, stop playing the broken wife, and show everyone exactly who Elena Reyes really was. I read through it one last time, making minor adjustments. It needed to be strong but not aggressive. Confident but not arrogant. The voice of someone who'd been underestimated and was about to prove everyone wrong. A sound from upstairs made me freeze. Footsteps. David was awake. I quickly closed all the windows on my computer, shut down the monitors, and slipped the laptop back into its hiding place. By the time David appeared in the office doorway, I was sitting in the regular desk chair, looking at my phone. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice rough with drowsiness. "Just restless," I said. "Thinking about the meeting with Victoria. About my job." He came over, putting his hands on my shoulders. The gesture probably looked comforting from the outside. To me, it felt like chains. "Don't worry about that," he said. "Something better will come along. It always does. Something better." He had no idea how right he was. "Come back to bed," he said. "You need your rest." I followed him upstairs, playing my role perfectly. The obedient wife. The broken woman. The person everyone thought they knew. In 72 hours, that person would cease to exist. Sunday morning arrived with clear skies and the first hints of fall in the air. David was in a good mood, humming in the shower, talking about taking me out to brunch. Playing the attentive husband now that he thought everything was falling into place. We went to the garden room, his favorite brunch spot. The place where he'd proposed 3 years ago, back when I'd still believed in us. The irony wasn't lost on me. "So," he said over mimosas, "I've been thinking. After the merger closes and everything settles down, maybe we should take a vacation. Somewhere tropical. Just us. What do you think?" I knew what this was. Guilt, manifesting as grand gestures. Or maybe strategy, keep the wife happy while he figured out his next move with Victoria. "That sounds nice," I said, smiling. "Where were you thinking? Maybe Turks and Caicos? That resort you liked." The resort I'd paid for during our honeymoon. The trip he'd later told his colleagues he'd treated me to, as if his salary could have covered it. "I'd like that," I lied. We made small talk over eggs Benedict and avocado toast. He told me about the office, carefully editing out any mention of Victoria. I told him about my week, carefully editing out anything real. 2 people sitting across from each other, both performing, both hiding. The difference was, I knew I was performing. David still thought his act was convincing. My phone buzzed. I ignored it, but David noticed. "You can check that," he said. "I don't mind." I pulled out my phone, the monitored one, the one he could access if he wanted. A text from my mother, asking about dinner next weekend. Nothing suspicious. Nothing that would tip him off. But my other phone, the secure one hidden in my car, was probably lighting up with messages about the fraud report. By now, the news would be spreading. Journalists would be making calls. Board members would be panicking. The SEC would be opening an investigation. And David had no idea the bomb had already gone off. We finished brunch and drove home. David spent the afternoon in his home office, making calls. I could hear his voice through the door, confident and assured. He was telling people not to worry, that the merger was solid, that any concerns about Datapulse's finances were overblown. He was scrambling, even if he didn't fully realize it yet. I spent the afternoon in the garden, pretending to read while actually monitoring news feeds on my secure tablet. The story was breaking faster than I'd anticipated. Financial Times had published an article at 2 p.m., Datapulse acquisition under scrutiny after accounting irregularities surface. Bloomberg followed at 3:30 with a deeper dive into Victoria's creative bookkeeping. By 5 p.m., Datapulse stock had dropped 34%. By 6 p.m., 3 board members had called emergency meetings. By 7 p.m., the merger was in serious jeopardy. David emerged from his office looking shaken. His phone hadn't stopped ringing all afternoon. He poured himself a drink, his third scotch of the evening, I noted, and sank into the living room sofa. "Everything okay?" I asked, the concerned wife. "It's fine," he said shortly. "Just some complications with the merger. Nothing I can't handle." Nothing he could handle. He had no idea what was coming. The fraud report was just the opening move. The real devastation would come Tuesday, when he discovered that his broken, medicated wife had orchestrated the entire thing. That night, after David finally fell into an exhausted sleep, I made my final preparations. I packed a bag, just essentials, and hid it in my car. I transferred the last of my personal files from the house to encrypted cloud storage. I sent final confirmation messages to Jennifer, Marcus, Catherine, and Thomas. Everything was ready. Monday would bring chaos. The merger closing would be delayed, maybe cancelled. Victoria would be fighting for her professional life. David would be caught between his loyalty to his mistress and his responsibility to Innovex. And on Tuesday morning, I would walk into that boardroom and reveal exactly who I'd been all along. I stood at our bedroom window, watching the moon rise over the quiet neighborhood. Somewhere out there, Victoria was probably panicking, David's colleagues were questioning his judgment, and the carefully constructed house of cards they'd built together was beginning to collapse. But they still thought the damage was limited. They still thought they could recover, spin the story, save the merger somehow. They had no idea that the fraud revelation was just the first domino. That I'd been arranging the pieces for 2 years, waiting for this moment. In 48 hours, they would understand. In 48 hours, the broken wife would disappear, and Elena Reyes, the real Elena Reyes, would take her place. I touched the cold glass of the window, feeling the weight of what was coming. 2 years of planning. 2 years of pretending. 2 years of watching my husband destroy me while I built the weapon that would destroy him. It was almost over. The game was almost won. And I was ready. Monday morning arrived like a reckoning. I woke to the sound of David's phone exploding with calls. He was already in his office, his voice rising with each conversation. Through the door, I heard fragments. "I don't know how this happened," Victoria assured me, "we need damage control." I made coffee, dressed carefully in my performance costume one last time, and waited. By noon, the merger was officially suspended. Datapulse stock had cratered 58%. The SEC had opened a formal investigation. 3 board members had called for David's resignation. Victoria was unreachable, her lawyers already circling. David came downstairs at 1 p.m., looking 10 years older. His tie was loose, his eyes red-rimmed. He'd been drinking. "Elena," he said, his voice breaking. "I need you to understand something. This merger, everything that's happening, it's not my fault. Victoria lied to me. She manipulated me. I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I nodded sympathetically, playing my part one final time. I believe you, I said softly. He grabbed my hands, desperate. The board meeting is tomorrow morning. Emergency session. They're going to crucify me. I need you there. I need you to support me. Please. Of course, I said. I'll be there. His relief was palpable. He actually thought I'd save him. That his broken, devoted wife would stand by him through this crisis. He had no idea I'd created it. Tuesday morning, I woke at 5 a.m. David was still asleep, exhausted from his panic. I showered, dressed not in my usual submissive clothes but in the power suit I'd hidden in my car. Navy blue Armani, the one I'd worn during my last day at Quantum Systems before my breakdown. I left before David woke, driving the Honda to Bellevue Tower. Jennifer was waiting in the lobby with Marcus Chen and 3 other board members I'd cultivated over 2 years. Ready? Jennifer asked. I've been ready for 2 years. We took the elevator to the executive floor. The boardroom was already filling, 12 members, legal counsel, and David, who arrived 15 minutes early, looking haggard but determined. He saw me and froze. Not because I was there, but because of how I looked. Confident. Professional. Nothing like the woman he'd left sleeping at home. Elena, he said uncertainly. What are you? Good morning, everyone, Marcus interrupted, calling the meeting to order. We have several critical items to address. First, the Datapulse acquisition and the fraud allegations. Second, management accountability. And third, a proposal for new leadership. David was sweating now. Marcus, I can explain everything. Victoria misled me about Datapulse's financials. I had no knowledge of. Actually, Marcus said, we have evidence that you did know. Emails between you and Victoria discussing the irregularities. Text messages about hiding them until after the merger closed. Hotel receipts showing inappropriate personal involvement with the CFO of a company you were acquiring. David's face went white. Those are private. Nothing's private when it involves fiduciary breach, Jennifer said calmly, sliding folders across the table to each board member. Especially when combined with adultery that violates your employment contract. I watched David's world collapse in real time. He turned to me, understanding finally dawning. You, he whispered. This was you. Yes, I said, my voice clear and strong. Every piece of evidence. Every investigation. Every move that brought us to this moment. Me. But you couldn't. I was never broken, David. I was never sick. I was watching. Learning. Building. While you were busy destroying me, I was preparing to destroy you. Marcus stood. David Rivera, you're terminated effective immediately. No severance, no stock options, no references. Security will escort you out. David looked around the table, searching for allies. There were none. Every board member had copies of the evidence. Every board member had known my real plan for months. And now, Marcus continued, we address the question of new leadership. The Datapulse acquisition is dead, but we have an alternative proposal. A restructuring plan that will save this company and position us for actual growth. Presented by Elena Reyes. I stood, feeling the weight of 2 years lift off my shoulders. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proposing a management buyout combined with outside investment from Titanium Capital. I've secured $50 million in funding. The plan restructures our debt, streamlines operations, and positions us to acquire Datapulse assets after their bankruptcy, at 30 cents on the dollar. I clicked through the presentation I'd spent months perfecting. Revenue projections. Market analysis. Growth strategies. Everything David thought he understood about this industry, but executed by someone who actually knew what they were doing. The proposal includes my appointment as CEO, I concluded. Marcus Chen will remain as chairman. We'll rebuild executive leadership with actual talent, not corporate ladder climbers sleeping their way to the top. The vote was unanimous. David was still in his chair, stunned into silence. Security had arrived but was waiting politely. One more thing, Jennifer said, handing David an envelope. Divorce papers. You're being served. He opened it with shaking hands, reading the terms. No alimony. No property. No claim to any assets acquired during the marriage, all documented as premarital or inherited. He'd leave with exactly what he'd brought, nothing. You planned this for 2 years, he said, looking at me with something between horror and admiration. While I thought you were falling apart, you were planning this. I learned from the best, I said. My father taught me that the best revenge isn't emotional, it's strategic. You taught me that the best disguise is the one people want to believe. Security escorted him out. I watched him go, feeling not triumph but relief. The performance was over. The real work could begin. That afternoon, I held my first meeting as CEO. I promoted talented people David had overlooked. I fired his cronies who'd enabled his behavior. I called Victoria's lawyers and offered her immunity in exchange for testimony against David. She took it. 3 months later, I stood in my corner office, watching the sunset over the city. Datapulse assets had been acquired. Innovex, now under my leadership, had doubled its market value. Victoria was testifying before the SEC. David was fighting fraud charges. My mother called. How does it feel, Mija? I smiled. Like I can finally breathe. Your father would be so proud. I know, I said. I finally know. I'd spent 2 years pretending to be broken. 2 years being underestimated. 2 years playing the role everyone expected. But I'd never forgotten who I really was. And now, finally, neither would anyone else. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.